I'd cry, but I'm out of tears. I would scream, but my vocal cords are fried. To explain how we got here, what's wrong with this device, and why I'm ready to throw myself off of a bridge, I gotta take you back to sometime in the 2000s. You know, I was a wee little grotesque and I was getting ready to go on a road trip to go visit my grandfather, who was unfortunately sick at the time and who has since passed. Since it was a rather long road trip, I lived in Pennsylvania at the time and I was going to, I believe, Southern Virginia, so, you know, it wasn't like the longest trip in the world. It wasn't like 12 plus hours or anything like that. It was only like, I don't know, like a 6-7 hour drive, something like that. My grandmother still wanted to ensure that I had at least some level of entertainment on the way, so she bought me a brand new in box, sealed, factory sealed, beautiful cobalt black and blue Nintendo DS Lite with a copy of, I believe it was Lego Batman, as well as New Super Mario Bros. DS, I want to say. I also think there was like a copy of like I Spy in there, which was a really fun game. And words cannot express how excited I was in that moment, because, you know, my favorite color has always been red, but I don't know, man, there's something about that cobalt black and blue one where I don't know if it's just because the way that the device looks, or if it's just because that was the first DS Lite I had. There's always been something about that color that has always pulled at my heartstrings. I've always loved how that color has looked. I've always just, you know, gotten those nostalgic feelings when I see it. And I'll never forget opening the device for the first time, running upstairs to my bedroom, plugging it in, popping in Lego Batman, because, you know, Lego Batman has always been one of my favorite games of all time. So, you know, again, I'll never forget popping in that game, playing it, having Lego Batman in my hands, holding the DS for the first time, because I remember, like, you know, hearing about the DS and seeing it, I was like, man, this is such a crazy, like, it's such a crazy looking device. Obviously, I'd seen things like that before with, like, you know, like, Game Boys and such, but, man, seeing games like Super Mario 64, or like I just mentioned with, like, Lego Batman running on the DS, it was just amazing, and it was so cool, because, obviously, I wasn't specifically asking for it in that moment, because it wasn't like my birthday or Christmas or anything like that was coming up. It was just one of those things where my grandma, again, wanted to ensure that I had something to entertain myself with on the road, because it was a rather lengthy trip. Unfortunately, though, my grandmother, originally, her plans were to sell the device after the trip to recoup some of the costs, because obviously, you know, it's one of those situations where money obviously wasn't always the best back in that era, but thankfully, you know, she didn't end up doing that, and I was able to keep that device, and I kept it for many years. I had it all the way from then up until 2019, when I unfortunately sold my DS and all the games I had for it to GameStop, so I could get enough money to pre-order Modern Warfare 2019. That is, I would say that it's one of the worst mistakes I've made in my life, and to an extent, yes and no. There was a few issues with the device by then. The battery was a little kaput, the D-pad was a little sunken in, though I could have easily fixed that just by opening it up and taking out the rubbers and this, that, or the other, but it is what it is. I ended up selling that and all my DS games in 2019, but then after that, I ended up moving down to Florida in the summer of 2020, and I want to say somewhere late 2020, early-ish 2021, I ended up getting really nostalgic, wanting my DS back, so I ended up buying a black DS Lite, which I made a whole video talking about that, where the intro to that video was, now this is a story all about how the DS became, or this DS became the broken mess that you're seeing right now, or something like that, and then I lifted up a bag that was just full of motherboard, broken DS shells, bumpers, and buttons. It was pretty comical, but yeah, that was a whole situation. Basically, I bought that DS Lite, and it was in decent condition for the most part. The buttons were in great condition, the battery was in good condition, the top screen was in good condition, and the bottom screen was scratched to heck and back and had a bit of yellowing. So I opened up the device, tried to replace the screen, because I bought it in 2021, but only this year, like a month ago, did I actually try to fix the device, and unfortunately, despite the fact that I've worked on dozens of DSs in my day, I'm assuming that the last owner just didn't take the best care of it, or didn't keep it in the best environment, because the insides were just kind of deteriorated. Like, everything was very fragile, and I could tell just from opening it that things were more sensitive than they typically should be with the DS, and it was so sensitive to a point of where one of the ribbon cables that, you know, I was using tweezers with it, you know, I wasn't like manhandling it, and again, I had done this procedure many times when it comes to like replacing screens and such, and, you know, flipping up that specific ribbon cable, it literally just snapped with me barely putting any pressure on it, so that was unfortunate. And it wasn't even like a, you know, just like a simple snap or like a click off to where I could just sit it back in, because that is like a thing. Like, you know, sometimes that little latch will come off and you just need to use like, you know, like a magnifying glass of some kind and use the tweezers to put it back inside of the hinges. But no, like the hinges and everything on side of the actual motherboard snapped, so yeah, that's where I kind of called it there. I was like, all right, you know what, this is just going to be a spare parts DS, And then I ended up finding another listing for a cobalt blue and black DS, just like I had as a kid. And everything looked great in the listing. You know, there was a few scuffs here and there, but for the most part, it looked to be in great condition. And it arrived 2 weeks later. And that's the real kicker here. It arrived 2 weeks later. It was supposed to arrive within a week, and it was coming from California. I live in Florida, going the whole way across the country. But USPS lost the package for a little over a week, about 8 days. So I'm assuming during that time the device suffered some kind of heat damage, because I'm not assuming that USPS would have been like, oh yeah, let's take the best care of this DS. Like, they didn't even know a DS was in there. It was just some envelope. So I'm sure it was in some hot facility or stuck on a hot truck. And once I received the device, again, I did notice there was a few issues with it, namely when I turned on the device. I don't know how well the camera's even going to pick it up, but the top screen and the bottom screen, it's not the worst delineation in the world, but, like, they are different brightness levels. If I can, like, kind of block the light here, I don't know how well you can tell. Again, it's not showing up on camera that well, but they're slightly different, you know, brightness levels, and that really should have been my first indicator that something was kind of wrong here. So again, I opened up the device, I did some testing, I was like, alright, you know, the rubbers under the buttons are pretty good for the most part. For the A button, that's the only one where, like, I've had a few issues with it, but even then, that's only, that was basically my fault, because I was, like, pressing on the wrong spot of it just when I was doing some rough testing. But when it comes to actual gameplay, when I'm just pressing it as I normally would, haven't had any issues there. The D-pad was a little mushy and wasn't registering all my inputs, so I went ahead and decided that I was going to open up the DS to replace the rubbers inside of it, you know, the D-pad one specifically, since that was the only one that was actually giving me any trouble. But unfortunately, one of the screws here on the back was stripped, so then I ended up going to my supermarket, having to buy super glue, super gluing the tip of the screwdriver to the screw in order to create enough friction to get the screw out. Thankfully, after a bit of willpower and manpower, I was able to get the back off, was able to get the, you know, rubber switched out, and I thought everything was good to go. Oh, and the bumpers that I had before were a little scuffed up, so I swapped out the bumpers with the bumpers from my previous DS that I just talked about, the one that ended up becoming a bag of, you know, nuts and bolts essentially. And I was like, okay, I now have the perfect DS Lite. Except for one problem. See, when I turn on this device, you guys aren't even going to be able to see it on the camera, because again, the only difference that you guys can really see is the fact that, I mean, I don't even know, again, how well it's actually going to show up on camera, that the brightness levels are a bit different, but it goes deeper than that. So if you're into retro gaming, especially when it comes to Game Boys and such, you may be familiar with a phenomenon called ghosting. Yeah, I just sent shivers down somebody's spine. Now, when it comes to some systems like the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and even the Game Boy Advance to a certain extent, ghosting is just the way of life. It's just part of the device, it's part of the device's charm, and the games were designed around that, especially some of the AGS models. Unfortunately, even the 101 models are affected by it, some worse than others. And with the DS Lite, that is also a similar situation, to where some systems are absolutely flawless, absolutely perfect, some have ghosting, some don't have ghosting. And my model has some pretty atrocious ghosting, and I can only assume, because this is the worst ghosting and, you know, motion artifacting that I've ever seen on a DS LCD ever. I can only assume that either A, it was replaced at some point, which I do not believe to be the case, because everything is aligned perfectly. I do not see any screen bleed, like when you look at the corners of the screen and look at it from different angles. It also just seems to be, like, like the quality of it overall, comparing it to another DS Lite that I've had, including my previous DS Lite, including my sister's DS Lite. The screen seems to be of the same quality overall, and seems to be literally one for one the exact same screen, so I do not believe that to be the case. So a few culprits here could either be due to age, which could also be a part of, like, why the screen is a bit more dim, or it could be heat damage, which, again, heat damage could play into why the screen is a bit dimmer, and could have possibly damaged one of the internals in one way or another, because, you know, heat can affect devices in so many different ways that are, like, it's really hard to say what is or isn't heat damage, because it can affect so many different devices in so many different ways. So the fact that the screens are a bit dimmer, and there's all that motion artifacting now that really definitely should not be there, I mean, it could be a number of things. It could be something wrong with one of the ribbon cables. And while I understand that, yes, this is an LCD screen, and furthermore, it's an LCD screen from 2006, motion artifacting and ghosting is going to be at least some part of it, because every LCD has it. Some have it less than others. I've gone on record saying this before. I actually prefer LCDs over OLEDs, just because for some reason LEDs and OLED screens just, you know, make my eyes, they just kind of strain my eyes and give me a headache after a while. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know if there's like a phenomenon or something, like if there's a name for that, but For some reason, me and OLEDs don't get along, so I just, you know, I just use LCD screens where I can. My TV's an LCD. The PS Vita I got, the 2000, I got the 2000 just because it has an LCD. On top of other, you know, quality of life improvements with that, like not having a proprietary charging port and, you know, just some of the other things. But just to make sure that I wasn't going crazy, because I have been playing on my DSi a good bit while waiting for my DS Lite, so I was like, okay, did my DSi spoil me a bit? And one thing that I noticed, and I didn't even notice this when I had first gotten my DSi actually has some screen yellowing, which, hey, that's another thing that sucks, because this is the first DS Lite that I've had since my original one as a child that has zero screen yellowing. The screens are crystal white. And I guess it's been so long since I've seen a crystal white DS Lite to where when I got my DSi, I didn't even notice that the screens were yellow. Like, I noticed that the top screen was slightly yellow, but it wasn't bothering me. But then I played this, where the colors are literally, like, pixel perfect. You cannot get more perfect than this. And then I went back to my DSi, I was like, oh man, this thing actually does have some screen yellowing, which unfortunately, since it's a Japanese model, that is pretty common for Japanese models because Japan is a rather humid country, and it's believed that humidity, or it's known that humidity plays a huge part into the screens yellowing. It is not the only factor though. Some screens are just kind of yellow out of the box just because Nintendo, obviously, you know, not every LCD is built the same, and when it comes to like the film or whatever that they have over the screens, sometimes that can change color, and, you know, it's a whole other conversation there. But yeah, now I'm in this really unfortunate predicament where I have the perfect DS Lite. Everything about this is perfect outside of the fact that the screens are slightly different brightness. Not the biggest deal in the world, except for the fact that there was all that disgusting ghosting and motion artifacting. And again, just to make sure that I wasn't being spoiled by the DSi, this was something I was going to say before I cut myself off. I compared it to my sister's DS Lite. I was like, okay, I know it's been a bit since I played on a DS Lite. Let me play on this one. I'm gonna use like the exact same cartridge, everything like that, just to make sure. And no, I played on there. Everything was pixel perfect. When Mario was running, I could pick out every question block, everything, every Goomba, every Koopa, every jump and move I was making. And I was like, okay, now let me go back to my DS Lite and just to make sure. And yeah, as soon as I got on it, all the blocks became a smeared blur. The Goombas were a smeared blur. When Mario's running, you can see his hat running behind his hat, and it's just... it's unfortunate because it's quote-unquote playable, but what's your definition of playable? Because for me, I play this thing and my eyes start hurting and I start feeling nauseous after 5 minutes. Is that really playable? I don't know. And again, it sucks because the colors are pixel perfect, so it's either I play on this device, which has perfect colors but disgusting ghosting artifacting, or I go and play my DSi, which I now know has slightly yellow screens on the top, which irks me. It only irks me when I go from this to that, but when I just turn on that and don't look at this, it doesn't bother me as much, and it's one of those things where it's like, it's just a fact of life. But now that I know that the screens are yellow, now I'm even more tempted to go ahead and buy that vibrant light blue one that I've been talking about for so long, because the one I got was that glossy red Japan exclusive DSi, which is an absolutely gorgeous system. But as I've mentioned in previous videos, the one that I've always wanted since I was a kid was that light blue, really vibrant one where it's almost like a tealish color, I guess. I don't know. It's like absolutely beautiful. So I want to get one of those with like a white screen at some point. None of that yellowing garbo, and, you know, hopefully that one won't have any ghosting of any kind. And while I'm talking about ghosting, I know some people are going to be like, oh, dude, just go get a DSi. It has an IPS display. None of them have any ghosting problems. I'm sorry. The XL systems are too big for me. I'm the type of guy where I like the standard size 2DS, 3DS, DSi, normal DS Lite, stuff like that. I just, XL systems, the screens are too big for me. It's something with my eyes. I don't like when my eyes have to dart all over a screen. Like my TV back there, it's only a 32 inch. My monitor, it's like a 19 or a 21 inch, you know, and I sit a pretty good reasonable distance from it. I like when I can see the whole screen at once without having to move my head, you know what I mean? And again, it's not the fact that like ghosting inherently bothers me, because it's just a fact of life for every LCD to different levels. It's just that this one clearly has a very obvious issue, and it's a shame because like, otherwise, again, it's an absolutely perfect system. I spent so much time on it. I literally went to the supermarket just to buy super glue, just to get a strip screw out of it, just so I could replace the rubbers, and now everything else is perfect about it. And it just makes me sad, man, because they say third time's the charm. Well, this is my third DS Lite, and it's kind of a charm, but at the same time, it's also kind of a doozy. So I'm hoping fourth time's a charm. And now I'm stuck. Do I stick with this one? Do I just play on my DS games on here and have disgusting motion blurring and artifacting? Do I play on my red DSi and deal with the yellowish screen screens, but have it not be a nauseating mess? Or do I go buy a new DS Lite and get my childhood DS back and hopefully get one with white screens, great colors, and no motion blurring? Even if the screens are slightly yellow, that's fine. That's just a fact of life for DS Lites. I just don't want the motion blurring. Or do I go out and buy a light, vibrant blue DSi that I've been talking about for many years, hopefully get one with white screens, no motion blurring, and just have that one be in good condition? Or do I buy both? If you know me, you know the obvious answer here, but the other part of this is I do have to be somewhat financially responsible, and the fact that I've already bought 2 DSs in the last month and each of them have their own issues is kind of making me paranoid, so it's getting to that point where, like, no matter what I do, even if I would open these babies up and start doing repairs myself, swapping things out to make the ultimate perfect DS, that would probably be just as much money as spinning the lottery and getting a brand new one anyway, because I want to try to get one without all the third-party parts and having to refurbish them myself. I want to get something as close to OEM as possible, but the thing is, you know, even if I would go out and buy a brand new in-box $600 DS Lite or something like that, because yeah, believe it or not, even though DS Lites retailed for only a little over $100 back in the day, nowadays you try to buy a brand new system. I know for 3DSs they're upwards of like $600. For DS Lites, I mean, I'm sure for some of the limited editions they're probably up there in the $500 plus range, but it wouldn't surprise me if even for the non-limited edition ones they're at least $300 to $600. And I'm looking on eBay right now, $700, $600. Yeah, for a factory sealed cobalt blue, $600. Yeah, I mean, if you want to get like a CIB one where it's used, but it comes with the box, you only have to pay $100, but obviously that's brand new. If you're looking brand new, yeah, like, no, yeah, even open box for like an Onyx Black one, $460. It's literally highway robbery, dude. The only reason I even bought these DSs for myself to begin with is because my birthday's coming up soon, you know, it's October 26th, that's my birthday. And I was like, you know what, I don't buy myself much often. Like, sure, I buy myself video games when I have some spare money to spend just because, you know, I love collecting video games, I love buying video games, I love playing video games, I love video games. Like, we're literally talking about video games right now. Like, I live and exist for video games. Video games are literally my purpose for living and being. But, yeah, so, you know, like, when I have spare money, I like buying myself video games, and since my birthday's coming up, I was like, hey, let me go all out a little bit, you know? I was like, I'll buy myself a DSi, and I'll buy myself a DS Lite, because I've been wanting my childhood DS Lite back, and I've been wanting a DSi since it released in 2009, and now it's like, okay, I did it. For once, I did something for myself, and then I went through all the effort of making sure there was something really nice for myself, and it still just turned out like this, so I don't know, it kind of bums me up, you know what I mean? It's just like, oh, it's just, I don't know, it's one of those things where I don't know if it's just because I grew up poor or if it's just a self-esteem thing, but I always feel guilty every time I do something for myself. Like, even when I bought my DSi and I bought my DS Lite, I felt really guilty, and I literally lost sleep over it a couple of nights. So I was like, man, should I really have bought that? Shouldn't I have saved that money for something else? I could have, like, I don't know, put that towards something else. I could have put it towards, like, Christmas gifts for my family, or giving back to you guys, or just doing something else. Like, that's literally how my brain works. And then I finally received this stuff. I finally can't even do something nice for myself for once, and it ends up like this, and it's just like, I guess I'm just not meant to do nice stuff for myself anymore. If I really wanted to recoup costs, I could order the new ones, make sure that both the DS Lite and DSi come in, you know, in good condition, and then, like, sell off this one and maybe get some recoup costs there. Even though the screens are yellow on the red one, I mean, they're not yellow enough to actually be a problem. It's just like a slight yellow, and again, I didn't even notice until comparing it to a DS that didn't have the yellowing problem. But, you know, again, that's a glossy red Japanese exclusive. I would never sell that. And even with this one, I don't know, it's like, I could either sell it off, or I could just, you know, after I make sure that the new one comes in good condition, or I could just hold on to it, because at most, I'd probably make like $30, $40 off of this at best, considering its defects, because if I'm going to sell this thing, I'm going to be honest and tell them, hey, there's a motion artifacting on the top screen. So yeah, probably like $30, $40 tops for this thing, and at that point, I feel like I ought to just hold on to it, because besides the top screen, literally everything about this device is perfect, and, you know, like, so, like, if I need spare parts in the future, which I ended up needing for my old DS for this one, it'd probably be better just to do it that way, rather than ordering fresh parts in the future, waiting for them to arrive, paying shipping, all that, so I'll probably just hold on to this one regardless, but I don't know. That's my rant, tangent, and whatever for the day. It just makes me really sad, because I turned it on, wanting to play some new Super Mario Bros. And again, just to make sure that it wasn't just my eyes, I played my DSi, and then I played my sister's DS Lite as well, and then I noticed that, hey, both the DSi and my sister's DS Lite, they were absolutely perfect. None of the disgusting smearing, blurring to a point of where the pixels look like they're almost disappearing from how smeared they get on theirs. But then on mine, it has that issue, and yeah, I don't know. It's just unfortunate. And again, I'm not being a crybaby over it or anything. Like, it's not like, oh, there's some slight ghosting, so now I'm complaining. No, it's like, it's actually really bad. It genuinely made me feel kind of sick last night. Like, it's really noticeable. If you've seen, like, Game Boy smearing, it's either on that level or worse. I would say actually worse, because even I can tolerate playing games like Super Mario Land or whatever on, like, a Game Boy, which, you know, that, like, Super Mario Land 2 specifically, and that one is known to have a good bit of ghosting on it, but no, I'm talking, like, I can tolerate that, but even this was bothering me. Anyway, I'll shut up now. Thanks for listening to me talk, rant, and tangent, and ramble for a bit, as always. But anyway, as always, massive shout out, thank you to all the patrons and channel members. Thank you to all of you in the low baller tier, and anybody shout out, thank you to the big baller tier, Alaskan, me, Daddy, and big shout out on the G tier, run events on the show. Thank you guys so much, guys. Literal legends, I love you. Have an amazing day, stay beautiful. I love you all. Peace.